Committee on Homeland Security, Subcommittee on Transportation and Maritime Security will come to order. Without objection, the chair may declare the subcommittee in recess at any point. The purpose of this hearing is to examine the priorities of TSA's budget request for fiscal year 2025. I would like to thank our distinguished witness, Administrator David Pikuski, for joining us today. Without objection, the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Carter, is permitted to sit with the subcommittee and ask questions of the witnesses. So ordered. I also want to welcome a new member of the subcommittee, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Kennedy. Thank you for joining us. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. On behalf of the members of our subcommittee, I'm pleased to welcome Administrator Pikuski to discuss TSA's fiscal year 2025 budget request. It has been over 2 decades since TSA's establishment after the terrorist attacks on September 11th, 2001. While TSA has grown and evolved as an agency, its mandate from the American people remains the same: to safeguard our transportation system. From freight rail, trucking, and pipelines to commercial aviation, TSA leads the nation's efforts in facilitating the safe and free movement of people and goods throughout the United States and its transportation systems. We know our economy depends on this to succeed and remain competitive around the world. Throughout this last year, this subcommittee has conducted hearings on issues ranging from TSA's modernization efforts to the role of technology in aviation security, to TSA's identity management work. This has been important work that gives us a better understanding of where TSA stands today. To carry out its mission, TSA needs the technology and the manpower to stay ahead of the quickly evolving threat landscape and to keep commerce flowing freely. We recognize that manpower continues to be an issue, and this subcommittee is committed to working with TSA to ensure that their frontline workers receive an equitable, competitive wage. While more work needs to be done to ensure the long-term viability of TSA's new pay plan, the increasing employee retention rates are an encouraging sign. I'm confident that TSA's leadership will continue to be an engaged, effective partner with this committee in addressing manpower issues. I'm less confident, however, in TSA's development and deployment of new technology. Last year, I raised concerns with the painfully slow timelines for TSA's rollout of the new computed topography systems and the second generation of credential authentication technology at TSA checkpoints across the country. These are estimated to be completed in fiscal years 2042 and 2049, respectively. That is simply unacceptable. 1 year later, I'm still concerned that the agency has not made enough strides to expedite the rollouts of these critical new technologies. In fact, when examining the budget request, it appears that technology has taken a back seat. I'm concerned that TSA has not requested enough for technology. TSA procurement budget request for fiscal year 2025 is over $40 million less than what Congress enacted in fiscal year 2023, and the research and development request for this fiscal year was barely half the size of the agency's R&D budget in fiscal year 2023. I understand the agency is also including a request to end the diversion of the passenger security fee, which would help the agency account for some of these changes. I am firmly against the diversion and recognize the need for Congress to engage this issue more thoughtfully and end to the bait and switch that is currently happening. Simply put, the American people pay $5.60 per flight for security. All of it should go to security. Despite these challenges, I am pleased that TSA is making tremendous progress with digital IDs. Through partnerships with states and global tech leaders such as Apple and Google, TSA is working to integrate mobile driver licenses and other forms of digital identification into their security screening process. TSA's work on identity management is making the security process safer, more efficient, and ultimately less intrusive to individual passengers. I am proud that the agency is now the de facto leader within the federal government in this space. As passenger volumes at airports continue to increase, the role of technology is even more important to ensure checkpoints are operating efficiently and that passengers have plenty of time to make their flights. This is not the time to lose focus on technology. In closing, the transportation sector needs an engaged, effective TSA to ensure the free flow of goods, people, and services across the country and around the world. Administrator Pikuski, my colleagues, and I stand ready to work with you to fulfill your mandate to the American people. I appreciate you being here today and look forward to your testimony. I now recognize the ranking member, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Thanadar, for his opening statement.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chairman Jimenez, for calling today's hearing. Before I begin, I want to welcome Congressman Kennedy to his first hearing as the member of our subcommittee. Welcome. I look forward to working with you. I also want to thank Administrator Pekoski for joining us to discuss TSA's budget request for fiscal year 2025. Last year, TSA faced a major funding shortfall as the agency sought more than $1 billion increase to pay for salary raises and expanded collective bargaining rights. I strongly supported that effort, and I was glad that we in Congress were able to fulfill TSA's request and fund critical improvements for the workforce. For fiscal 2025, to continue these workforce initiatives, TSA has asked and has requested a $377 million increase for periodic pay raises and career ladder promotions, which will keep TSA employees in line with other federal workers. It is critical that Congress continues its efforts and its support for TSA's new pay system, which is having a significant positive impact. Pay raises are making an enormous difference in the lives of transportation security officers, federal air marshals, and other TSA employees across the country. They are also helping TSA address high rates of attrition, which have plagued the agency for years and have now fallen nearly in half. Tomorrow, TSA and the union representing the TSO workforce, the American Federation of Government Employees, will formalize a new collective bargaining agreement that will provide additional benefits for the agency and its workforce. I look forward to hearing more from the administrator about the impact of these workforce initiatives are having on TSA's ability to carry out its security mission. I also hope to hear more about the difficult choices TSA has made to determine funding priorities. TSA's budget request does not include funding for the Visible Intermodal Prevention and Response, or VIPER program, which is critical to surface transportation security. The request also does not include funding for law enforcement officer and canine reimbursement programs, which airports rely on to help with security costs. In addition, the request includes approximately $90 million for computer tomography carry-on baggage screening machines, representing an increase from fiscal year 2024 funding, but still not enough to allow the program to deploy machines to all screening checkpoints on a reasonable timeline. I hope that Congress will be able to restore and increase funding for these programs. Doing so will require creative solutions. As it stands, TSA's budget request assumes that Congress will be able to redirect to TSA $1.6 billion in passenger security fee collections, which are slated for diversion to the General Treasury. In fiscal 2024, Congress returned $800 million in fees, but doing so required an extension of sequestration cuts to mandatory spending programs in fiscal 2032. Returning twice the fee in fiscal 2025 will require twice as large an offset. To go beyond TSA's budget request and restoring funding to key programs, Congress should also consider a modest increase to passenger security fees. I'm proud to co-sponsor Ranking Member Thompson's bill, the Fund the TSA Act, which would end the diversion of passenger security fees and raise fees by $2 per trip to provide TSA with the resources it desperately needs. I encourage my colleagues to give the bill serious consideration as a solution to TSA's funding challenges. I look forward to today's discussion, and Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you to the ranking member, Mr. Thanadar. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. Again, I am pleased to have a distinguished witness before us today on this critical topic. I ask that our witness please rise and raise his right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give before this Committee on Homeland Security of the United States House of Representatives will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Please be seated. Let the record reflect that the witness is answered in the affirmative. I would now like to formally introduce our witness. David P. Pekoski is currently serving his second term as the 7th Administrator of the Transportation Security Administration. In this capacity, he leads a workforce of over 60,000 employees and is responsible for the security operations at nearly 444 airports throughout the United States. Under his leadership, TSA has improved transportation security through close partnerships and alliances, culture of innovation, and the development of a dedicated workforce. Prior to his tenure at TSA, he served as the 26th Vice Commandant of the U.S. Coast Guard, culminating a Coast Guard career that included extensive operational and command experience. I thank the Administrator for being here today, and I recognize Administrator Pekoski for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statements.
Chairman Jimenez, Ranking Member Thanadar, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you this afternoon. Before I begin, I'd like to offer my condolences on the recent passing of Congressman Donald Payne Jr., a member of the subcommittee. He was a wonderful man and a public servant. On behalf of TSA, I offer our condolences to his family, friends, and to you, his colleagues. He will be missed. Turning to TSA's budget, I appreciate your support of our recently enacted fiscal year 2024 appropriation. It fully annualized our new compensation plan, which provides funding to pay TSA employees at the same pay rate as the rest of the federal government. Since this new compensation plan was first implemented less than a year ago, it has had significant positive impacts on TSA. Our retention is up, we have many more candidates pursuing opportunities to serve, and morale has markedly improved as reflected in the highest ever federal employee viewpoint survey results in TSA's history. Tomorrow, I will sign a new and expanded collective bargaining agreement, which is also fully supported in the fiscal year 2024 appropriation. The President's fiscal year 25 request seeks to build upon FY24 and recognizes that difficult choices need to be made considering the funding constraints we face. I believe this budget provides the right balance and will position TSA to remain the agile security agency envisioned when we were established nearly 23 years ago. Ensuring security of our transportation system requires constant focus, continued investment, and hard work. I would like to recognize and thank our TSA workforce and industry partners in aviation and surface transportation, both domestic and abroad, for their role and contributions in strengthening the security of our transportation system. This is National Police Week, established by a joint resolution of Congress in 1962, where we pay special recognition to law enforcement officers who have lost their lives in the line of duty. I am grateful for the law enforcement officers of TSA, our FAMs and criminal investigators, and our law enforcement partners across America for their dedication in protecting our transportation system. The transportation sector is in the midst of a remarkable recovery from the pandemic. Passenger volumes were up by almost 13% in 2023, and this year the growth continues. There's been 9% growth at Miami International, 8% in Detroit, 11% at Lafayette Regional, 6% at JFK, 10% in Tampa, and furthermore, LAX and Buffalo Niagara have seen 7 and 14% rates of increase in volumes, respectively. 7 of the 10 busiest days ever in U.S. airports occurred in the last 12 months, and 2 in just the past week. And we project that 3.1 million passengers will be screened on some days this coming summer. Tomorrow, we will hold a press event with our industry partners at LaGuardia Airport, where we will talk about our collective readiness and the strength of our partnership for what will likely be our busiest summer yet. An important priority in the President's FY25 request is continued investment in technology at our security checkpoints across the country. 2 ongoing technology projects in particular are included in the FY25 request. They both improve security effectiveness, efficiency, and the customer experience. The first is our upgrade of checkpoint X-ray technology to computed tomography or CT systems. At the rate of investment in the FY25 request, which is $90 million, our capital investment plan shows that this project will be complete in 2042, 18 years from now. Similarly, our upgrade of checkpoint identity verification technology to include facial recognition increases performance in this critical first element of checkpoint screening. At the rate of investment in the FY25 request, which is $9 million, our capital investment plan shows this project will be complete in 2049, 25 years from now. We have the opportunity to accelerate both projects with additional investment, as TSA has the vendors and processes in place to complete them in this decade, not in the 2040s. One potential solution to the current budget environment may be the 9/11 passenger security fee. For the past 3 years, the President's budget has been accompanied by a legislative proposal that would end the diversion to deficit reduction of $1.6 billion per year in 9/11 security fee revenue. The legislative proposal would instead restore all 9/11 fee revenue to aviation security as originally intended. The diversion of fee revenue began with the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2013 and is due to expire at the end of fiscal year 27. Ending the fee diversion early in FY25 would provide the flexibility to include more funding in the Aviation Security Capital Fund and in our operating accounts, especially additional screener positions, given the passenger growth that we're seeing. I look forward to working with you to fully enact the President's legislative proposal, end the fee diversion completely, and direct all fee revenue to its intended purpose of aviation security. Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Tanadar, members of the subcommittee, thank you again for your support of TSA. I look forward to your questions and to working with all of you to ensure that TSA has the resources and authorities needed to meet its mission in protecting our nation's vital transportation system. Thank you.
Thank you, Administrator. Members will be recognized by order of seniority for their 5 minutes of questioning, and I recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. Administrator Koski, you just said that the authorization to divert the passenger fee ends in 27. When you make your estimates of 2042 and 2049, is that assuming that that diversion will continue past 27?
No, sir. It assumes that the diversion will continue as planned, and that's why it's out so far. If the diversion were to end, they would be completed much quicker.
Okay. Could you give me a timetable? If the diversion ends in 27, then how much quicker can you implement the new technologies?
Well, if the diversion ends in 25 rather than 27.
Okay. No, I'm said 27.
Okay.
Your authorization ends in 27.
Right.
So assume that it ends in 27. How much quicker can you get it done?
If it ends in 27, we could get the identity verification project done in 2033, and we could get the computed tomography or the X-ray project done in 2032.
Okay, and if we end it now, then you can do it within this decade. So you'll accelerate it by a couple of years.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yep.
Fair enough. How do we compare with other countries? In other words, leading edge, not companies, but countries around the world. Have you gone around and watched what they're doing, what they're planning to do? If we don't invest more in technology, are we going to fall behind those countries in the ability to protect the American passenger?
Yes, sir. I think we'll fall behind to a degree. I mean, the biggest difference is the United States has 430 airports in its system. No other country has that number of airports. And from my perspective, it's important that this computed tomography and this identity verification technology and the on-person screening technology be in every airport. Because as you know, if you enter an airport, you're in our system overall. So we have a challenge of scale that other countries don't have. There are some countries that are investing heavily in this technology, but there are many others that are not yet there. But we've been working hard to kind of bring the baseline of global aviation security up with these technology advancements.
Well, let's talk about Western Europe, France, Germany, Great Britain in particular, okay? Probably Germany and Great Britain, okay? Are they doing something different than we are? Are they going to use the same technology that we are? Are they looking at something else? And also, what is their timetable for implementing these new technologies?
So for some countries, the timetable is much faster than ours because the airports purchase the technology rather than their federal government, their central government. We are all looking at the same technology. We all recognize around the globe that computed tomography is the technology of the present and the future. It's got a great deal of future potential out 20 or 30 years. The key challenge that's in front of all of us right now is an attempt to align standards of technology performance. And we've made a lot of good progress on that, particularly with the European Civil Aviation Conference.
So in those countries that then the individual airports, those airport authorities, et cetera, they're tasked with acquiring the technology that their TSAs require. It's not the TSA itself.
Yes, sir. What happens is the Civil Aviation Authority in those countries establishes the standards of technology performance and then works with the airports to establish a timeline for when they can come in compliance with that, and also predicates some passenger convenience issues with the acquisition of that technology. For example, with CT technology, you can permit larger volumes of liquids, and so that needs to be predicated, of course, on having CT in place. The other thing that I would add is, as you know, we're working on a one-stop security prototype that hopefully will kick off in the next several months. Part of our requirement and our partners' requirement, so it's bi-directional, is that we both have CT technology and technology that's performing at the same level in terms of their software packages.
Now, wouldn't that also work here in the United States, that we develop the standards, et cetera, and then have each individual airport have to abide by those standards, and then they would have to purchase that equipment themselves? That could work here in the United States. I was thinking about that. Maybe we're looking about this the wrong way. We should be actually divvying it up amongst the 440 airports and tell them, hey, you have to have this by this date, and then they'll have it. Could we work it that way? I think we could.
You could. I would submit, though, that the way we're doing it centrally is probably much more efficient because we're a big buyer, and we can influence the...
Well, we could set up the system. We can say, these are the things, this is what you have to buy, and here through this contract, all right? So you'd still have that economy of scale. But it wouldn't be on the federal government to actually fund every single piece of equipment. And you could probably get it done quicker, because if we say you got to do that within 2 years, they may be able to do it. I don't know if the manufacturing has the capacity, but there's another way. There's different ways to skin this cat, all right? And so I'm intrigued by the European model, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit more. My time is up. I now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Thanadar.
Thank you, Chairman Jimenez. And thank you, Administrator, for your testimony. And thank you for your partnership in advocating for pay raises for TSA employees. As I travel, I get a chance to meet with the hardworking men and women of TSA, and I clearly, visibly see a difference in those hardworking officers. I believe the new pay system represents a sea change for TSA and provides it with more stable footing to mature as an agency. I understand that attrition rates have dropped nearly in half since pay raises were announced. What impact does the drop in attrition rates have on TSA's day-to-day operation? And how does it impact the culture of the agency?
Thank you, sir. And you're right. I mean, our attrition rates have dropped by 50%. And we had, in the last month, our lowest attrition rate ever for the overall TSA workforce of 7.8%. We were up in the 20s for a period of time. So it's a sea change with respect to attrition. We're also seeing a very significant change when we open up jobs for competition. We see far more people applying for those jobs than occurred in the last 5 years. So lower attrition, more applicants for open positions. And then, as I mentioned in the opening statement, we have this survey that every federal agency fills out every year. It's the same year over year, so it's very easy to make very good comparisons. Highest FEV scores ever in our history were this past year.
Thank you. Thank you, and I appreciate that. TSA's new pay system also provides improved career ladder opportunities. What are some of those opportunities, and how will they continue to drive improvements for the agency in years to come?
Yes, sir. The career ladder opportunities are critically important for career development and critically important for us to increase the average level of experience in our checkpoint operations so that it's higher than what it was a year ago. And so the way we work it is if somebody is new to TSA, comes in and starts out at a certain pay band, the pay ladder provides automatic promotions after a year to the next higher pay band. So it provides a very significant incentive for people to progress forward and to stay with the agency. Statistically, we know that if we have an employee that stays for longer than a year, they're much more likely to stay for 5. If they stay for 5, they're much more likely to stay for a full career. And we patterned these ladder programs after other agencies, and in particular, our pattern was after Customs and Border Protection, which has been very successful in retaining employees.
Thank you. Thank you. And I understand tomorrow you'll be in New York formalizing the new collective bargaining agreement. And I'm just excited. I wanted to join you, but I have work to do here in DC. But I'm really excited, and I, congratulate you for that success. Changing subject here, since the ransomware attack on Colonial Pipeline in May 2021, TSA has issued a series of cybersecurity requirements for transportation system owners and operators across various modes of transportation, from pipelines to mass transit and rail to aviation. As industry partners work to implement these requirements and TSA works to develop them into full rulemaking, TSA must have the resources and expertise necessary to understand industry operations, engage with stakeholders, develop well-informed policies, and inspect the regulatory compliance. Mr. Administrator, what cybersecurity investment does TSA require in terms of both funding and personnel? And also, what has TSA done to assess its cybersecurity resource and personnel needs?
Thank you for the question, sir. And we've done an awful lot with respect to asking for additional funds for cybersecurity resources. We have roughly 200 people now within the agency. So if you think of where we were back in, let's say 2021 when Colonial Pipeline first occurred, we've made significant progress. And one of the things we found is we don't have a shortage of candidates wanting to work in the federal government for however long to help us with our cybersecurity efforts. We have in the FY24 request, which was funded, a bit of an increase. In FY25, another increase. The increases, though, are constrained by our top line capability. We'd certainly like to have more because we have a significant responsibility to go out and work with our industry partners. I mean, we regulate pipeline systems, rail systems, airlines, and airports. So it's a big swath of the transportation sector, and a bigger inspection workforce would really help us out.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. And Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the newest member of the subcommittee, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you very much. And Administrator Pekoski, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise.
Thank you for your service. Chairman, the ranking member, thank you for the kind words. Happy to be a part of this wonderful committee. I was reminded earlier in the Homeland Security Committee meeting as a full that this committee began out of New York in the horrific terrorist attacks of 9/11. And I know our work continues each and every day to secure our country and our travelers and the airports and the ports and the bridges and the freight and the railways. So thank you, number one, for your service. I also want to thank the workforce. I see there's a number of folks that have joined you here today, TSA officers, and we are grateful to the workers that keep our travelers moving and safe and our economy moving all at the same time. I'm excited about the fact that you'll be at LaGuardia tomorrow to sign the collective bargaining agreement, first in quite some time, and well-deserved for those workers. It's good for everyone. On a regular basis, as we travel, the traveling public at airports, for starters, see those officers laboring to move people through security. Depending on what time of day and what airport you're at, the line could be extraordinarily long, and the workforce can be extraordinarily overtaxed and overburdened, depending on how many people are working. And I'm sure they can tell you better than I can that the travelers come in waves. We've seen it. It's a regular occurrence, again, depending on what hub you're at any particular time. What sort of guardrails do you have in place as an organization to keep the flow moving, to keep the ratio of officers in a good place so that the traveling public is moved through in a decisive manner, as well as ensuring that those that are traveling are screened effectively?
Sure, thank you for your comments, and I'm incredibly proud of this workforce of the representatives that are sitting behind me that do the very hard work each and every day to make sure that all of us can travel safely and securely. So I really appreciate your comments. In terms of things that we're doing, pay was the big issue. That was our number one priority in the fiscal 24 budget. Really appreciate this subcommittee, the Appropriations Subcommittee, and the entire Congress supporting us in that regard. And we already see, as Mr. Tanadar noted, we already see the benefits of this, not just in the statistics, but when you visit the checkpoints and you engage with our officers, they feel more valued, and they should always feel very valued in what they do. For me, it's really important that security is our primary focus. As you mentioned, 9/11, our job is on our watch not to ever have a repeat of a terrorist attack on our system. And so we emphasize security, effectiveness each and every day. But importantly, and we talked a little bit about this in all of our opening statements, it's important to give our officers the tools that they need to do this job. It's not easy. If you're looking at an X-ray image and you're looking at hundreds of X-ray images in a given shift, to be able to find some very small items that might represent a hazard to people that are flying. We had, over the past year, detected over 6,700 firearms in accessible property on carry-on bags, for example. So we have a keen focus on making sure that we put the technology tools in place. But I also think what's very important, and I know the officers behind me would agree, is that we work very hard to make sure we have a workplace culture that's positive, that's focused on career development, of helping each individual officer out so that they can realize their own personal expectations of service and be able to provide that to the passengers we see. And you know, what I think about all the time is I can't name another federal agency that has direct contact with, on a daily basis, 2.5, 2.6 million people, and represents the federal government, represents the United States, represents the TSA, to all those travelers. So I'm very proud of the work they do, and incredibly focused on making sure that, you know, my policy is people first. We are a 62,000 person organization. We don't run if we don't place people first, and I think that our folks are doing an incredible job, so I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman's time is up. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for allowing me to waive on to be here. Thank you very much. I wish to enter this document from Sheriff Lopinto into the record.
Without objection.
I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here. Sheriff Lopinto of Louisiana has expressed his concerns about the elimination of funding to the local law enforcement explosive detective canine teams program and how it would negatively impact public safety across the country. Mr. Administrator, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate my colleagues allowing me to waive on to the subcommittee today, and I want to take this opportunity to discuss with the National Explosive Detection Canine Team Program through TSA, which TSA provides canine and canine training to local law enforcement agencies. For many years, TSA has also provided law enforcement agencies participating in the program with reimbursement for the cost of housing and taking care of canines. Unfortunately, in TSA's budget request for fiscal years 24 and 25, TSA proposed eliminating $34.1 million in funding for K-9 reimbursements. In the fiscal year 2024 minibus appropriations bill for the Department of Homeland Security, Congress followed through on TSA's proposal and eliminated K-9 reimbursement funding. This funding is critical to supporting local law enforcement agencies' K-9 operation, which deploy to a wide range of environments and provide explosive detection capabilities. Without reimbursements, local agencies may be forced to reduce or eliminate their K-9 programs. Mr. Administrator, I certainly recognize that TSA has a tough situation and are in a tough spot trying to balance competing priorities, especially when given the need to increase pay for TSA employees, which I strongly support. However, I'm worried that elimination of K-9 reimbursements would degrade the ability of law enforcement agencies to respond to threats and security incidents within the transportation environment. What impact are you seeing so far from the defunding of this program, and have you heard from many local law enforcement agencies what they do in the light of this reduction?
Thank you, Mr. Carter. I appreciate your comments and question, and you know, I would echo your sentiment that the National Explosive Detection K-9 program is an extremely valuable program to law enforcement agencies and to TSAs as well. It is the biggest explosive detection K-9 program in the world, about 1,100 K-9s total. The reason for the reduction is simply the limited top line that we have. In other words, we don't have enough money to fund everything that we need to do. We have to make some very hard choices whenever that happens. And one of the hard choices was to eliminate the law enforcement K-9 reimbursement. But what we did not eliminate is all the support we provide for those K-9s. We source and train the K-9. We train the handlers. We offer training in different techniques. We update the explosive odorless, and we do certification processes. And so my conversations with officials like Sheriff Lopinto, it has been, listen, this is not something that we want to do. It's something that our budget limitations require us to do. We hope that you don't give up your K-9s and that you engage with us over the course of the year and renew your agreements with us, which most law enforcement agencies know.
And they certainly don't want to, but
Right.
as you might imagine, with the fiscal crunch that you face, local governments likewise face them.
Right.
But we are constantly faced with pay me now or pay me later scenarios. Something as critical as bomb sniffing dogs, drug sniffing dogs, dogs that have the ability to, in a very large SWAT, save thousands of lives by identifying would-be threats, is one of those things that I would implore you, the agency, and others to reconsider, given the circumstances and the outcome that can happen in the wake of having limited or no access to K-9 response teams. As you develop these new agreements, will you work with local law enforcement agencies to understand their needs and impacts of the loss in funding of their operations? And will you consider tailoring each agreement to the needs of law enforcement agencies in question rather than issuing a blanket agreement? As you know, one size does not fit all. Different agencies in Louisiana particularly, Jefferson Parish particularly is stronger than any other and oftentimes has to loan their K-9s to other agencies. This elimination would not only impact the great need at our airports, but also our bus stations and throughout the rest of the state. So I would really urge that you look at that. I'm also making an impassioned plea to our friends as we work on funding bills for fiscal year 25. I hope my colleagues on the Appropriations Committee will take a look at the importance of this program and figure out a way to restore the funding. And obviously having your support in that measure is critically important. And you can count on our support, not only from this committee and Homeland Security more broadly, but also for members of Congress who recognize we've seen what happened with 9/11. We see what's happening in our country every single day with terrorist threats, and you see them far more than ever bubbles up to the public. This is one of those cases where penny wise and perhaps pound foolish. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Lalota.
The federal government's passenger security fee is a total scam. It's $1 billion bait and switch collected off of hardworking American air travelers, $11.20 at a time. And for my constituents and Americans watching at home, in the name of aviation security and 9/11 airport security, you get charged $5.60 for every one-way trip you take, $11.20 for a round trip for every airplane ticket. And despite the name of the fee collection program, the passenger security fee, over $1 billion of those funds, collected under the guise of more security, are diverted to the Treasury for expenditures having absolutely zero to do with passenger security and keeping our skies safe. It's a bait and switch scam perpetrated by our federal government, and hardworking and unknowing Americans are the victims. And to use September 11th to perpetuate the scam is especially offensive, especially for a New Yorker like myself. As part of the FY24 appropriations bills, about 1/3 of the diversion will go back to the Department of Homeland Security. It's a start, and it's a step in the right direction, but it's surely not enough. The entire diversion must end, and that revenue should only be utilized by the TSA. Thank you for being here, sir. I appreciate your input. It's always valued by the committee. My first question is this. In the absence of the full passenger security fee revenue, and due to its diversion, how has the TSA managed the inherent risks to airport security?
Sir, it's very hard to do that, and what you see are technology investments that we know we need to make. We need to have better X-ray technology across every single checkpoint in every airport in the country. We can't do that. We won't get that done until 2042. The same thing with identity verification. We want to move to facial recognition, digital identities. That should be in every single airport. That's 2049. This is a long, long way off. You heard Mr. Carter talk about the canine reimbursement program. We can't fund that because our top line is not there. We had to pull back law enforcement. This is Police Week. We had to pull back law enforcement officer reimbursement programs because of top line constraints. I agree with you 100%. That $1.6 billion was intended for aviation security. It ought to go to aviation security. And when that diversion ends, and I really hope it does, that it increases the top line of TSA by that amount.
Would our skies be safer if we didn't divert, if the federal government did not divert the funds?
Without question.
Would the travel that Americans have through their airports be more efficient? Would it take less time to get to through the security line?
It would, because we could hire more people and we could put better technology in place.
Great, thank you for that. As part of the FY24 appropriations bill, the funding for security checkpoint technology was also more than halved, from approximately $80 million to about $35 million. And last year, the TSA told this committee that based on past, present, and current projected funding, it's not until, like you just said, 25 years from now, in 2049, that TSA will meet full operational capability for credential authentication technology machines. And 18 years from now, in 2042, we will meet the standard for checkpoint property screening systems, including computing tomography. And that was with more than double the funding that was appropriated in the FY24 bill. Administrator, what does that projection look like now, in your view, sir?
Yes, sir. The programs will probably stay within those same general timeframes, 2042, 2043, 2049, maybe 2050. But it's just crazy late. I mean, you know, when you're looking at 20 plus years, that's a long, long time to wait. I would highlight for you too that the CT investment is designed to help us detect very low sizes of explosive, critical to the security of the system, and that needs to be done on an accelerated basis. The other thing I would offer very quickly is our R&D budget was also halved. And so your future capability development is not at the pace that it needs to be at.
So in contemplation of the passenger security fee being improperly diverted, if it wasn't diverted and those two metrics you provided not meeting your goals until 2049 and 2042, if those funds were not diverted and they were used for their intended use, what would you say about those timelines? They would not only shift to the left from 2049 and 42 respectively, about how far would they shift to the left, if you know?
Well, they would shift by about 20 years to the left. I mean, you go from the 2040s into the late 2020s. And it would allow us also to do a lot of other things that we just can't even contemplate doing right now with our budget constraints.
Thank you. I have just a few seconds left. I want to say thanks for being here and informing us on these important issues. There seems to be bipartisan interest in getting this right. We've certainly identified the issue. Now it's a matter of ensuring that we account for not only passenger safety, but the efficiency they go through the airport and plugging holes in our budget. And your testimony today, sir, is valuable to that, and I want to say thanks.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your support.
Gentleman's time has expired. We'll go through a second round, and so I'll be following up on what I ended up with the last time, and what they do in Europe. And what they do in Europe, some members that weren't here, especially Mr. Lalotta, you may want to hear. It's not the central government that provides the technology at the airports. It's actually the airports themselves, and that the central government actually sets the standards of what they need. Let me go back to that passenger security fee. When it was originally established, I mean, I can't imagine that all of it goes to technology. What else did it go for?
Sure, it goes to pay. And a lot of the development of the programs we have, working with our industry partners to make sure that airports, for example, have security within the airport that is overseen by TSA but not accomplished by TSA.
All right, so now, I'm not going to take much longer on this, but I'd like to see you and talk about the possibility of actually changing our model, that the individual airports actually provide the technology that we say they need, and that's passed on to the passenger. But somehow this passenger fee that we have, also that diversion, that ends up going to TSA. Or at least a portion of, or maybe a portion of it goes back to these airports to provide what they need. But we need to, I think, explore this a little bit more, because I think that these individual airports can probably get their stuff done faster than we can. When they're mandated to do X, Y, Z by a certain time, they'll do it. The airports generate their own fees, and all the fees that are generated at the airport are supposed to be used at the airport. I know there may be some problem with smaller airports that don't have the volume, but I want to see how they do this in Europe and why they think that's a better model than us. And sometimes we just may learn something from them that, yeah, maybe it is a better model than what we have right now. We need to accelerate it, and I'm with Mr. Lalotta all the way. We need to, if we're saying we're going to charge a fee for a service, then all that money needs to be for that service. It's a classic bait and switch of the American people are thinking they're paying for security when in fact they're not. They're paying to balance the budget of the United States government. Yes, some of it is being used for security, but the majority of it is not. And that's not right. And so I'll be working with Mr. Lalotta and maybe other members of this committee or subcommittee to see, okay, what we can do about it. The good news is by 2027, it's supposed to end, unless it's reauthorized. And I'll tell you this, I'm not reauthorizing it, and I don't think any member of the subcommittee will probably reauthorize it either. So by 2027, at least, you'll get it back. But I'm not so sure that we're the best vehicle for implementing all these security measures. I think these airports need to start picking up part of the load too. So with that, I'm going to yield the rest of my time back, and I recognize the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Thanadar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Administrator, earlier this week, Ranking Member Thompson reintroduced his bill, the Rights for the TSA Workforce Act of 2024, which would codify better pay, collective bargaining rights, and third-party adverse appeal rights by applying Title V of the U.S. Code to TSA in statute. Previous versions of this bill passed the House in the 116th and 117th Congress. This year, for the first time, we introduced the bill with an equal number of Republican and Democratic original co-sponsors. I happen to be one of the co-sponsors. So we are representing a bipartisan coalition of members who agree that this is the sensible thing to do for TSA. Mr. Administrator, do you agree that we should not backtrack on the advancements we have collectively made for the TSA workforce and should instead codify them in statute to ensure their permanence?
Yes, sir, we absolutely should never backtrack on the commitments we've made. You would lose the workforce in an instant in doing that, and would be very hard to recover. The bill, as written, would codify many of the things that we're already doing, which provides that guarantee. For me, when I look at the pay compensation plan that we just put in place, one of the most important things is to make sure that stays permanently linked to the general schedule pay rate, so we don't find ourselves in a position of trying to get back to that after a couple of years of decline. So we strongly support that legislation.
Thank you. And then last year, Ranking Member Thompson also, introduced the TSA Act, which would provide funding to address many of the challenges facing TSA. The bill would raise passenger security fee by $2 per one-way ticket and end the diversion of fee away from TSA to the general treasury and index fees to inflation going forward. Doing so would provide sufficient funding for salary increases and expand labor rights for TSA workers. Additional computer tomography machines and critical airport law enforcement and canine programs. Although no one likes increased fee on their airline ticket, it's critical that we right-size the TSA budget and make sure you have the resources you need to carry out your mission. Mr. Administrator, you have said before that you believe the TSA Act would be helpful to your agency, which I appreciate. Did you have any conversation about the possibility of including an increase in passenger security fees as part of the budget request?
So I think, if you look at when the 9/11 fee was established at its current $5.60 level, there is nothing in there that adjusts that figure for inflation. And so if you just simply straight line adjust it for inflation, it would now be $7.50, so roughly the $2 that was mentioned. So I agree that rebaselining it where it needs to be, and that generates about $1.5 billion in additional revenue, rebaselining it where it is, but importantly, to put an escalator in that legislation so we don't get behind by 4 or 5% each and every year.
Thank you. And then do you believe TSA's top-line budget number needs to increase to get the agency all the funding it really needs?
Yes, sir, and I think that's evidenced in the reductions you see in our budget, things that we want to invest in that we have to reduce.
Thank you. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Chairman. Administrator Prokowski, I just want to go back to where we left off conversation a few minutes back. I want to talk about the security in the airports and the passenger experience, because I think they go hand in hand. And not just for the traveling public, but also for the workforce. And again, I believe there are times that the workforce is overburdened by large waves of the traveling public. It's not good for anybody. What may we be able to do, whether it's a new guidance or requirements within TSA and how the departments are managed on the front lines, or is it a need for more investment and resources to get more staff, recruitment, retainment, et cetera, so that we can attend to these waves in the different times that they're coming. You're at JFK or LaGuardia on a Friday night, you're going to have a different experience than if you're there on a Tuesday afternoon. And that's just New York City. It's the same for O'Hare or Reagan or Orlando or Buffalo Niagara International. Take your pick, as you know. So what is it that we may be able to do to address those issues and make the experience for moving people through the process more efficient and effective?
Yeah, thanks for the question, sir. And I would highlight your last point first is providing more flexibility in staffing, because what ends up happening is if passenger volumes increase higher than what was originally projected in the budget, and fiscal 25 is a good example of that. We project in the budget that passenger volumes will increase 4.5%. They're at 8.5% already. And so what happens is that burden falls on the screening workforce, it falls on the vetting workforce that we have that does all the behind-the-scenes vetting of passengers. It falls under Federal Air Marshal Service as well. And so, providing at least close to commensurate increases in staffing with passenger volume growth. And we don't need to be exactly the same, because technology and efficiencies will allow us to be a little bit less than that, but not by half. The other thing that I think is really important, and I'd be happy to have a discussion with you more in depth about this, is we are putting together what we call a customer experience roadmap. Because I believe, and I'm sure the officers believe as well, if we do a better job improving the customer, the passenger experience, those passengers will reflect that back to the officers. And I want to make sure that we focus on the individuals in our system that we have a concern about. And that's the whole premise behind the pre-check program, is that, hey, we have a certain set of passengers that we term trusted travelers. We can give them a lighter level of screening as a result. They move faster, they wait 10 minutes generally or less all the time. If we can either do a couple things, increase that pre-check population, that would benefit us, it would benefit the travelers, and then increase things that we look at with respect to the customer experience. We're doing a lot of work with the U.S. Travel Association right now on that very topic, and their goal, and they stood up a commission for seamless and secure travel in the United States. And I think you'll see out of that commission results report some very good recommendations for all of us to consider.
That's helpful. Does there need to be a commission study across the nation to the various ports of call to address that issue as well?
So there have been a lot of efforts by the executive branch to look at customer experience writ large for taxpayers and for visitors to our country when they receive any federal service whatsoever. And each agency has some metrics to achieve in that regard. For us, one of the metrics is, can we be more consistent in our wait time experience for passengers? And we do have wait time standards, but we want to make sure that we don't sacrifice security effectiveness for efficiency, and that goes kind of back to the staffing and the technology issue I talked about before. The other thing that the chairman raised is that we do have a program for airports. If they want to purchase the technology themselves, they can purchase off of our what we call a capability acceptance list, and many airports have done that already. LaGuardia has done it. JFK is going to be doing it. Denver has done it. And this allows them to kind of get ahead of the curve when they open up a brand new checkpoint. A lot of investment in airports around the country now. They don't want to open up a new checkpoint. I wouldn't either, and put old technology in that checkpoint. They want to put the latest technology in place, and this program gives them that avenue to do it. And sometimes, it's up to $50 or $60 million worth of investment on the part of the airport.
Thank you.
Thank you to the gentleman from New York. I thank the witness for his valuable testimony and the members for their questions. The members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we would ask the witness to respond to these in writing. Pursuant to Committee Rule 7D, the hearing record will be open for 10 days. Without objection, this subcommittee stands adjourned.